Welcome everyone to the Open Cafe conversation about alternatives in Europe and beyond. My name is Alina Trkulja, and I have the pleasure of introducing today's guests of the Open University. Niccolò Milanese, the chair of the European Alternatives. It's a transnational, not international, but transnational civil society organization, and also citizen movement promoting democracy, equality and culture, let's say, beyond the nation state, on the European level and beyond. Today with us is also Gianluca Solera, I hope I pronounced it well, the director of Italy-Europe Mediterranean Department at COSPE, a development cooperation NGO, let's say, working in more than 30 countries today. So our today's topic of discussion is who is afraid of alternatives? And we will talk about networking and its role in transformation in Europe and Mediterranean. So before I ask our today's guests to introduce themselves maybe a bit more in detail, I will pose the first question of the day for us to start thinking about it. And this is, why do we need alternative politics in Europe and beyond?
Okay, thanks for the question. Thanks also for the chance to be at the Open University. I think it's really a fantastic event, so I'm pleased to be here. I'll take the question in this sense. Why do we need European alternatives? Because I think maybe we can all understand why we might want political alternatives, but the important gesture with European alternatives, the organization I'm the chair of, is to say those alternatives need to be European, or that Europe is an important battleground to fight for alternatives right at the moment. And I think that because, or we think that because there is a huge contest right at the moment about what Europe ought to mean. There are those who say that Europe is and should be a racist notion, one that it defines a white Christian civilization and which should therefore exclude others. There are plenty of historical precedents for this reading of Europe, or this understanding of Europe. It's a kind of Nazi understanding of Europe, and we know the bloody consequences of it. We think that we ought to fight for an alternative understanding of Europe, one which finds inside the meaning of Europe itself the possibility of otherness, of diversity, of alterity, of dialogue, of democracy, all of these kinds of things, which are currently largely missing from Europe. We think it's important to fight that battle rather than actually to retreat and leave Europe to those who want to define it in racist and xenophobic ways, because we think that for large numbers of us living in Europe, Europe is somehow our inescapable destiny. Firstly, we're not going to change continents, and secondly, despite the multiplying rumors of its demise, it's unlikely that the European institutions simply go away or disappear or collapse in the coming weeks, months, or years. And so the battle has to be fought, and what is a little bit scary for many of us who are involved in trying to fight this battle to define Europe in another way is how absent we are, how absent critical voices are from this whole discussion. At the point when we need to rely on Angela Merkel to be a spokesperson for a more tolerant and welcoming Europe, we really have a problem. If she becomes the figurehead of, defending refugee rights because nobody else has managed to come on the public scene and say this loudly enough, there's a problem about alternative politics in Europe. And so we are trying, as European alternatives, to rally all of those who believe that Europe needs to be fought for in the very idea, somehow despite itself. And so because of this, we take a lot of inspiration from the Czech philosopher Jan Patočka, who talked about Europe after Europe, that it's our somehow inescapable heritage of bloody wars and colonialism and so on as Europeans that actually should push us to revalue Europe and to find a positive meaning for Europe after the death of failed European hegemony in the past. And so that, in a sense, is the mission of European alternatives. It seems to us ever more apparent or rather, it seems to many more people, I think, ever more apparent that Europe is a crucial player in the current political situation. Maybe that was always, or for some time has been very apparent here in Bosnia, but for many in the rest of the European continent, it just wasn't so obvious until these last years how decisive decisions taken at a European level are for everyday lives of people in Greece, for example. Over the past couple of years, it's become extremely obvious to everybody that decisions that are taken at a European level have immense consequences, but the forces for alternatives have not yet managed to organize themselves sufficiently to contest those decisions. So that's what we're working on.
Thank you. Gianluca?
Okay, thank you, Alina, and good afternoon. Yeah, and I work for this organization, which is a development cooperation NGO. But on the same time, I've been engaged in several movements in the past. I was, just to say a few words, as you asked me to do, I was in the European Parliament for 10 years as a political advisor to the European Greens, and then I worked on intercultural affairs in the Mediterranean for almost 9 years. Just to give you a picture of my background. You were asking why do we need alternative politics? The first thing that comes to my mind is, first of all, why do we need a vision? What I feel it is missing is a vision. I mean, I feel that politics are the more and more a kind of bureaucratic exercise which is played within the time frame of chronicles, and which has missed the sense of the history. And ourselves as European citizens are somehow losing the idea about which space and which culture we belong to. I remember when I was a bit younger, nobody was questioning the idea of European integration. When I was one of the first joining the Erasmus program, it was 1988-89. And it was really let's say the best we could wish as a youth, to be able to move freely in a European context, to be able to exchange, to settle down in other countries, to find a job somewhere else, and to exercise our political rights in other countries. Now, if you talk to anybody among even the Italian youth, they even question whether the European integration is a good thing. So even the imaginary has deeply changed, and there is, for me, therefore, really an issue of a vision which is not embodied anymore by the political class. I believe that not many people believe that their political class believe what they say. And therefore this then reflects into a kind of identity problem. For me, first of all, what we have to do is to defend the idea of European integration, but not in exclusive terms, not in the terms of making sure where the borders are, but in the terms of making sure what was the idea behind it. And the idea behind it was to overcome a culture of confrontation, of conflict, of war, and to create a space of freedoms, of exchange, of mobility, and of cooperation. And this is the major issues behind. Then whatever we apply it to Europe or to the Mediterranean space or to other parts of the world, the vision is that. The vision are the elements on which basis then European institutions have been created. And this is what I believe we have to strive for, to defend. For me, there is another problem, which is the issue of feeling that we can still change things. I believe that we have lost somehow, let's say, the positivity that we can determine the future. I believe that we have somehow absorbed this dominant culture of things are working in this way because it's like this, whether it is in terms of political gain, whether it is in terms of the economic development model, whether it is in terms of international relations, it's like this, and it will have to be like this. So we have somehow absorbed this idea that history has ended, and this is very dangerous because then people loses the feeling of being social animals, losing the feeling of being able to create spaces of experimenting alternatives, because it's a matter of experimenting alternatives. It's very difficult to tell you what would be Europe in 10 years' time. It's very difficult to pretend to have the solutions, to have the right ideas for what the future of Europe will be. But it is certainly absolutely a necessity that we defend the idea, and we are convinced that we can experiment alternatives on the ground, whether in our communities, whether in our districts, in our cities, in our nations. And for this, we need somehow a kind of effort to re-socialize people, to make people really players as part of an active, transformative communities in the places where we live.
Okay, this really brings us to the next question of how do we get there? How do we get to the alternative politics coming into existence? What are the forms of organization that are possible and necessary in order to have the alternative politics as such?
That's a big question. The overarching question is, who's afraid of alternatives? I mean, many people are afraid of alternatives. The state is afraid of alternatives, and in many places doing all they can to shut down spaces for those alternatives to emerge. Where I came from yesterday, Paris is a good example of somewhere trying to shut down spaces of open discussion about alternatives. Then you could have a debate about whether it's prudent, given the strength of some alternatives, that fascist alternatives in France at the moment, to take certain kinds of steps to try and address that. That's a different debate. But who's afraid of alternatives? The state is obviously afraid of alternatives. But also, I would say many of us who want to promote alternatives are afraid of what those alternatives mean. And in particular, afraid of having to work for them or defend them over a long period of time. It's one thing to, one very important thing, to stand up in protests, to organize contestation and all kinds of actions which are punctual occasions where the frustration of the people can be expressed. It's quite another thing, but obviously as important, probably more important, to try to build organizations or institutions or movements which over a period of time continue to organize and to grow in strength. And trying to do that requires facing a whole load of things we spontaneously are fearful of, like having to deal with issues around, well, how is the movement going to work? Who's going to lead it? How do we deal with the money in a responsible way? How do we deal with the whole questions of human resources, staff? There's all these kinds of logistical things which are often very far away from our spontaneous concerns as political activists, but over the long term are largely determinant in how much we're able to do. The most interesting thing from that point of view with European alternatives is that we've genuinely tried to be transnational. So we're opposed to the nation state, and so we've tried in the whole way it's structured, also legally, also financially, also in its daily operations, to get as far away from a national functioning as we could. But it's rather difficult because legal systems in Europe are still by and large national, and so you get involved in a whole series of battles which didn't seem like the most important right at the beginning. I often have the problem of putting my glass of water in the wrong place when I'm in cafes. Thankfully someone here was to correct me. So a whole series of battles which I didn't think was so important right at the beginning, but turn out to be extremely important. Fighting, for example, for the recognition of certain kinds of legal structures in different countries, fighting for the possibility of being able to spend money easily in different countries to organize events if you're coming from another country. These kinds of things are not the reason we got involved in activism, but they're actually the enabling conditions that would make change possible at a European level. And you come to appreciate that actually the legal setup of the European Union but I mean, I knew that before, but you come to appreciate in details that the legal setup of the European Union has not been made with citizens' action in mind. It's been made with the action of corporations and others in mind. And so there's a very important battle to be able to set up the space, also legally, constitutionally, in all kinds of ways, such that citizen-led democracy is actually possible in Europe. And so it's these battles which are going to take a long time and which are not the ones that come on the front pages of the newspapers, but actually some of the most important that are the horizon of our imaginations, which are some years hence, are going to be able to make radical politics possible in Europe, I believe.
The institutions of the European Union, like you observed before, are not likely to be changed anytime soon. But how do you see the role of activists and networking in the process of perhaps their change in the future?
Okay. Well, I didn't want to suggest that the institutions of the European Union won't be changed anytime soon. In fact, I think there will be treaty changes rather soon. And one of the, again, alarming things from my point of view is that all the preparatory work for us to be able to have a say from a radical position about what should be in treaty change of the European Union is not being done. We're leaving the space to the right wing to decide in advance about what Europe should look like. And we're not prepared at the moment for when, in my view, in a couple of years, there will be discussions about changing the European treaties. And the movements, the left, are not in any position right at the moment to take a serious part in those negotiations. So that's one of the things I think is most urgent, is for us to organize around what actually do we want Europe to look like. Because only if we start from this vision question, we are in a strong position then to negotiate when the time comes for the changes. And I think that time is soon.
Before, I was stressing, as the last point I was stressing was the idea of resocializing people. Because for me, it's really a matter of recreating spaces where people can still believe that they can transform the reality. And I remember when I was living in Egypt during the revolution, 2011 revolution, there was a famous say which was coming from an old Egyptian say, which is translated into English. The old Egyptian say is conviviality, staying together, spending time together has no price, okay? And they changed just one single letter in one word, and the meaning became curfew has no price. It's a word in Arabic which is al-hadh, is the joy of staying together, and became al-hadhr, which is the curfew in Arabic. Why? And it became a kind of political revolutionary slogan used by the revolutionary youth, because during the curfew, people were coming out of their houses and they were starting to discuss about the daily life, about social and economic conditions in their own districts. And they were saying, please, power, leave us the curfew. Don't take away the curfew. And even in a society which is extremely somehow warm in terms of social and family ties, like an Egyptian society, one of the major revolutionary slogans used by the youth was pointing out on the issue of resocializing people. So, and if it is true for this kind of society, it is certainly true for our own societies. And how to do it? I think it's a matter of exercising citizenship. Exercising citizenship means, taking full awareness of what to be a citizen means, which implies, let's say, revendicating rights and exercising duties, fulfilling duties. I can tell you the experience I had with a major social movement in Italy, which has become somehow the symbol of democratic participation. It's called, the acronym is NOTAV. It's a movement which was born in the province of Turin against the high-speed train link, a major infrastructural work. Which has completely shaped the political scenario in that part of Italy, because at the point that the political parties started somehow getting the agenda and division from the social movement, and not the opposite. At the point that, for example, when this movement started, the issue was just this high-speed train link. But the transformation that people who were not used to talk about politics, to talk about civic engagement, this transformation was so important that they started to question everything afterwards. And they forced the local political class to do the same. So they were questioning afterwards not only the high-speed train link, they were questioning of the ski resorts development. I'm talking about the Alps. It's a region close to the Alps. They were questioning about urban estate development. They were questioning the issue of industrial development. They were questioning the issue of the agricultural model, agricultural production model. They were questioning the issue of how the local community, the local council were structured in terms of a balance of power between the elected people and the electoral body. And this is, for me, exercising citizenship. So I think that we have to multiply these spaces, these opportunities for exercising citizenship, because by exercising citizenship, we also create the opportunity to go beyond ideological kingdoms, ideological families, to go beyond the fact whether you represent the right or the left. Because when you do not exercise citizenship, then this is the most fertile ground for radical thought, radical movements, fascist ideas, excluding visions, etc. And the last point I want to make, I also believe, like the work that European Alternatives does about acting on a transnational level. And I think that this is the more and more important, not only in Europe, but also along the borders of Europe. And we as activists, besides helping to create the spaces for exercising citizenship beyond ideological, let's say, families, we should also be able to, to go beyond the concept of the borders, to create a transnational space for thinking and acting among activist communities, even beyond what are the political borders of Europe now. And this is very difficult now. This is very difficult, but it's for me essential if we want to challenge the situation which are facing now, and which threatens the spaces of rights both inside Europe and in the neighboring countries.
You mentioned before that the European integration process is being contested. At the same time, the idea of European citizenship and European identity is being contested. And new, let's say, new views, new ways of conceiving citizenship are emerging. One of those is the idea of Mediterranean citizenship that your organization and yourself are working on. Could you tell us a bit more about the idea of Mediterranean citizenship and what your organization is doing in this regard?
Yeah, Mediterranean citizenship is a provocation, of course, because when you think to citizenship, first you think to which kind of passport you have in your pocket, okay? So there is no European, Euro-Mediterranean institutional body which delivers a passport, okay? But it's a provocation in the sense that it's an invitation to think to the idea of citizenship beyond the institutional framework and political framework we are living now. Of course, the migration flows are helping in that and are questioning what is citizenship. For me, Mediterranean citizenship means rethinking our approach vis-à-vis the Mediterranean. In my country, Mediterranean has been seen, especially in the last years, as the source of all problems. The source of instability, the source of war, the source, of course, of terrorism right now, the source of threat to the job market with the arrival of poor immigrants. And we have been showing our shoulders to the Mediterranean. We have somehow internalized the idea we are the periphery of a kingdom, and the kingdom has its capital cities between London, Brussels, and Berlin. Okay, and this is for me, first of all, an act of betrayal of our history and the history of many of the countries located in this part of the world. Whereas if we are what we are, it's because we have been at the center of economic, cultural and political exchanges, and also confrontations with the other parts of the Mediterranean during centuries. And therefore, we cannot just say, turning our back and saying, we are not part of it. We have to recognize that we are part of it, and we have to do what is necessary in order that we don't see the Mediterranean anymore as the source of all problems and threats, but the opportunity for the future. Because if we do not do it, then the alternative is war, which can be played in different ways, through weapons, through adjustment economic policies, because what has happened to Greece is the same that is on the agenda of reforms in countries like Egypt, okay? And through the displacement of millions of people from one country to another, without any future of any hope of a dignified future, and it's really a matter of changing our chip, our mind, and this is why if we don't have it, of course we cannot have a vision. So for me, this vision can come if we as citizens, as engaged activists, can play in it, can act. And can also create let's say the infrastructure, the spaces for having this vision developed and discussed beyond our own community. And this is what I mean, myself personally and other people are trying to do, to create this idea of a transnational activist community which goes beyond the European borders, but which share the idea that the Mediterranean is a common house and can be a space for thinking, strategizing, acting together, taking the inheritance of 2011. And the inheritance of 2011 was what the youth was chanting in the streets, which is freedom, work, and social justice.
For those of you who are maybe more interested in the Mediterranean space and Mediterranean citizenship, I would suggest the book. Maybe now is the time to mention it. Very interesting that Gianluca wrote. Yes, you can also buy it outside. So a little commercial. Yes, it is in Italian. Before we go to the part where you are invited to pose questions to our guests. Okay, please. Maybe to share a mic.
Okay, thank you. Wow, it's loud. Thank you very much for the starting a discussion, but to me it looks that we just sat in the background of something we need to go a bit further on. I understand that alternative is there, and we're talking about this as a second step from the critique of what is going on now. So if we are here to propose alternatives, that means that we are criticizing what we don't like in contemporary society. Now, a critique will be from several, like thousands of different perspectives, so we need to know which kind of perspective we want to tackle. And in my point of view, the idea of a major engagement of citizenship is not enough, because we should question how to engage in citizenship. It reminds me of this little story of Woody Allen about this New Yorker Jew, and he was asked what he preferred, to be buried under earth when he would be dead, or just the cremation. I will say, well, probably I would prefer to be cremated than to be buried, but in any way, I would prefer the two options to holiday with my wife. So the fact is that there is always a third option that we don't take into consideration. The example of engagement in citizenship. If one-fourth or one-fifth of the French electoral body is choosing for Marine Le Pen, this is an engagement. They are active in taking the citizenship as a tool. So we need to rely on certain moral ground when you make decisions and when we propose alternatives. Because just hoping that the youth will just go in the street and, let's say, be progressive is not enough. Because just take in consideration a young country like Czech Republic. 25 years ago, they were demonstrating for freedom. And now, in the same place in Albertov, in Prague, they were just chanting anti-Islam and xenophobic chants. And they were youth. They're young people, they read newspaper, they feel engaged, they want to say their own message, and they just have xenophobic attitudes. There is part of society that works like that. So if we propose alternatives, we cannot be naive in proposing like just engage more. We need to rely on something. So the question is on what we should rely for a future of European alternatives. Will be human rights theory, would be human rights taken from the European Convention on Human Rights or UN bodies. We want to go back to French Revolution, or we want to go back to socialism. What is the idea that we should use as a starting ground? I have my ideas, you know, I'm a human rights defender. I know where is my ground. But I just don't understand how we can talk about alternatives without giving our sources, our references.
Do you want to answer the question immediately or to collect? Okay. Okay, thanks.
I'll go more or less along the lines of our previous speaker. And I just want to go like one step back and refer to the very title of this session. And to me, it seems there's something like very dangerous, if not ultimately dangerous, appearing exactly because of this sort of a global, let's say it like that, urge to look for something else. And I mean, I guess it can be like easily recognized what I'm referring to here, and this is definitely this formation that we call Islamic State, or we call it Daesh, or somebody calls it in a different way, because obviously there we see a certain alternative. I mean, I don't know whether all of us can agree, but this is actually an alternative movement, which at the same time has something that two of you, and I guess many of us here, miss now, and this is this vision that of a future we are looking for. And I'm sort of trying to point to this deadlock that we are now in as whatever we call ourselves, human rights defenders, or I don't know, progressives, or whatever. And this is exactly this fact that I think Gianluca sort of referred, how our political life has come to mean nothing more than this like time-locked expression of a will or an opinion, which then takes its form or expression within a framework of parliamentary institutions. And if I like just to wrap it up, what is sort of missing in what you were saying, but I guess there's also like idea or analysis that stands behind. And to my mind, this means two things. First, how do we answer, or how your analysis or your ideas deal with the question of how global societies still, I mean, at least to my mind, is still a social formation determined by large within a structure of class society, because I sort of didn't really hear this, and how an alternative can appear within this framework of ultimately strong actors, which are both, you know, states, but also these transnational movements, which are, you know, like operating for some years now, but with different sort of goals, not to alternate, but to stay and grow more or less the same. So thank you.
Yes, please.
I would also like to comment, and perhaps it will be finally formed in some sort of a question. I would like also to focus on what was missing. I think that in this conversation, more focus was on who's afraid than on alternatives. In which sense? Because I believe that there are alternatives ongoing, happening as we speak, and what I missed in the conversation is practical information about what is exactly the daily work that you both do in your organizations. Because in a way, I find that for me personally would be inspirational. And something that I think is very not constructive is that in most of the conversations about alternatives, majority of time and the discussion is spent on something that I would refer like a diagnosis. Of course, we have to analyze the problems in terms of why is the situation as it is, but I believe that, and that is in a way something that I have perceived lately, that more of time is spent on critiquing but basically talking about how miserable the situation is, and in a way that has become the obstacle to this talk about, let's see, what the possible vision is, what is exactly happening in the field, what are people talking about, or how are they living politically day to day, and it is not being perceived, and it is missing from conversation. And in that way, this type of conversation is participating in the conceptualization of politics as it has been perceived. And I speak from personal experience. I truly believe in what you have said, that the local communities or the functioning of local politics and local issues is basically, I believe, a very important focal point in terms of engaging people just to participate. Because in a way, the term politics has been co-opted, and it is perceived as this imposed, way of what does it mean to practice politics. You have to be a politician, you have to be a member of a party, blah, 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 some sort of representative body, whereas I think politics as a term and as a practice needs to be drawn from that imposed framework.
Okay, if I understood well, basically you're saying we all know what the problem is, but we don't know
I'm
what
not
is
saying
to be
that,
done.
I mean, it should not be, of course we have to analyze, but I always miss, the refugee crisis, if nothing, has shown there are alternatives that are functioning. There are people who are engaging in a very political day-to-day work, showing precisely how transnational concepts and how transnational is working. So basically what I'm missing is that this is also something that should be a part of the conversation.
Okay, thank you. We don't have that much time because the next session is about to start soon. So let's leave it maybe at this point for the guests to answer the questions posed by now.
So I totally agree with the suggestion that alternatives actually exist. That's part of the reason why I don't necessarily need to set out a recipe for what we need to do. The point is there are myriad alternative social and political practices across this continent, across the Mediterranean space as well. The problem, from my point of view, is that they're divided and they are they're geographically divided, they're uncoordinated, and so at crucial transnational levels where decisions which actually set the framework for how society is going to look take place, they are inaudible and ignored. And so what European Alternatives tries to do is firstly to network those already existing alternatives, so putting people into contact. Secondly, trying to engage in a process of deliberation which comes from that, because although there's many different situated practices which are acting in different spheres, whether it be refugee, climate change, etc., there's actually, when you put them together into contact, a significant amount of disagreement about what should be done and how to coordinate. And so that's an important process to lead. And thirdly, and maybe that's what I insisted too much on, but I think it's very important, is to reconceptualize the geography that we are acting in. And I think that's an essential component. It's kind of one of the things that I was saying, one of the things that Gianluca was saying, but we have to get out of a national framework of thinking about politics, which continuously inflects our understanding and modes of organizing, even when we try and act outside the nation state. So if you look at the way the Greek crisis was discussed, thought about, and also acted upon, there was a continuous attempt to reframe it as though it was a national crisis where Berlin was a center taking decisions and we needed to somehow contest that central power. This is reframing a nation state at a larger level and actually not what's going on. And so if we frame it in those terms, we forfeit the possibility to act on the real ways decisions are taking part. And that requires us reconceptualizing our geographical map of political decision and political action.
Okay, if we would need 10 hours, not 1 hour under stress. Because, you know, we can say things that then, of course, you react, but where is the substance? It's difficult to develop. I mean, when I wrote this book, it took me 3 years, and I traveled in 20 countries. And, of course, it's difficult to synthesize this. And I'll try to give some concept and some ideas. First of all, the issue of course, engagement, civic engagement cannot be seen as a neutral thing, let's say, without values. For me, engagement must be associated to brotherhood, to exercise brotherhood. If we take, for example, what happened in Paris, and for me, the most important, one of the most important things we should do, and there are people who are doing it, is to involve the Muslim community in Europe in an exercise of expanding the spaces of freedoms and solidarity. This is one of the first things that should be done besides the idea of destroying military, the monster, no? So brotherhood for me but it's a practice, It must something that, if you take, for example, the issue of the refugees, it's not only a matter of organizing the welcoming structures. It's not just a matter that the state takes the responsibility, creates the centers where they take, they instruct, I mean, they create the conditions so they have shelter, and they teach them about their rights and their duties, etc. But it's also a matter of organizing a voluntary welcoming. There are people in Italy who have been asking, as private people, to welcome these refugees in their own houses. And there is a part of the left in Italy who were contesting it, saying this goes against the fact that the state must take its responsibilities. Why? Of course the state must take its responsibility. Why cannot we exercise our own brotherhood as a voluntary exercise? That does not mean that we are saying, okay, we are privatizing and these functions and we are somehow undermining the role of the state. No, we have to act politically, but we have also to exercise brotherhood. Because this is exactly what is in the mind of some political minds or some terrorist minds, to destroy the spaces of brotherhoods. either by reducing the freedom, the spaces of freedoms, or by reducing the spaces of security. And this is the first point. The second point, in terms of, showing that there is a problem of classes, societies, that there are people who have access to rights, people who do not have access to rights. For me, what has happened in 2011 was the most important inheritance is that there have been young people coming from different cultural backgrounds, coming from different political backgrounds, who have shown that the issue is not your own identity, your own history, your own biography. The issue of instability is that there are people who have access to rights and people who do not have access to rights. And this is the major things we have to address. And the fact that we are different, we are Muslims, we are atheists, we speak Arabic or we speak Italian, by our differences we can contribute in focusing on this issue, the universal access to rights, which breaks any kind of divisions. And in terms of the work, what we are trying to do is to create this kind of transnational idea of activist communities in the Mediterranean, which challenges any kind of messages we are hearing in these last days. No, we cannot have a future together. We are substantially different, and we have to close the borders. We have to militarize our societies, etc. The response, I think, should be, first of all, to have a transnational strategy based on what we can do. First of all, maybe a manifesto for Mediterranean integration. Mediterranean meaning where you have Europe, Asia, and Africa together. A political manifesto to open a debate. Do not forget that the debate on the idea of a united Europe came out of a manifesto which was written by 3 or 4 anti-fascist people who were confined by Mussolini in a small island, and during this confinement they wrote this manifesto for a free and united Europe. And that was during the World War II, when the bombs were still falling on European cities and people did not yet know who would have won the war. And I think we should do the same exercise as in terms of launching a debate on a different image of this region. And then maybe we should create more spaces for cultural and political exchange, like this one, like others. We made an exercise in Sicily, we called it Sabir Maidan, a kind of festival for cultural and Mediterranean culture and citizen, but multiply the spaces where people from different backgrounds and different ideas meet and discuss together. We should not be afraid to talk with those who have different ideas. I have many friends who voted the Northern Liga. I come from the northern Italy. I have many friends who vote for Northern Liga. These people maybe a few years ago were voting for a leftist party. They are completely confused. They receive messages from everywhere, from the social media, from the political talk shows on TV, about negative messages. This is why we need to create spaces where we can open a debate and confront these people. We have to mix with people, otherwise this message will prevail. And then we need maybe also to exchange practices of resistance, of creating alternatives in Greece, in Egypt, in Tunis, in Italy, throughout some mechanism, throughout some kind of institute, throughout some organization which is transnational. The same, maybe we need an alternative media, a kind of online radio TV on a transnational level where we offer another kind of information. So that if a young journalist from Egypt writes about how they deal with interreligious clashes within your Egyptian cities, this information is translated into different languages which are spoken in the region and can circulate. You know, and finally, I think we need to experiment social and solidarity economy. And this is possible. This is possible. You can do many projects on the local level, and this is possible. It is already done. Personally, I'm not personal, but my organization is doing it in Tunisia, for example, as well as in other European countries. But to experiment on the ground the transformation also of economy and of kind of governance practices in your own communities.
Thank you so much to you for coming, and also to our guests for sharing their ideas. And we would like to close maybe the session now and leave the space for the discussion about the protests and the plenums, which is about to start in a couple of minutes. Yeah. Thank you so much.